Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Midlands online worship service. My name is Susan Meyer and I will be your worship associate for this morning's service. If you haven't already, please type in the chat box who you are and who you have brought with you today. Unitarian Universalism is a welcoming and inclusive religion. It encourages us to keep open hearts and minds because our own experience, conscience, and reason are the final authorities in religion. It affirms the inherent worth and dignity of every person and that we are all connected to each other and the earth. If you are visiting us today, a special welcome to you. We appreciate you spending some of your Sunday morning with us. If you have any questions, please let us know in the chat box, by phone, or through our Facebook page. If you've been attending for some time and have come to feel that this is your spiritual home and you're considering becoming a member of the fellowship, please contact our minister, Reverend Eric Severson, our office administrator, Wendy Altmeyer, or have your interest expressed in the chat box. If you have a chalice or candle at home and would like to join us in our chalice lighting remotely, now would be a good time to get that ready. We will include joys and sorrows this morning as we normally do during the service. You will want to find the participant icon to raise your hand for that. And now we'll move on to announcements. You will see them on your screen. Next week's service, Myths About Myths, is on Sunday, May 16th at 10:30 a.m. Myths are more than mere stories. Whether fictitious or not, they are sacred tales that help us understand the world. And yet, we draw from the wisdom of Chimamanda Adichie, David Loy, and others to appreciate the need for multiple views. This will be led by Reverend Eric Severson. Virtual religious education will be held today at 1. Only 2 more classes until summer. Contact Shana at dre@uufom.org if you need the Zoom link. The worship team is looking for new members. You would attend meetings via Zoom, help plan lay-led services, and help recruit volunteers for worship roles. Email Sarah Nusswarren at gmail.com to join or get more information. Our new website is available. Check it out at uufom.org. Members received their new passwords via email last Friday. Contact Wendy if you have any questions. Currently, 74% of adult members and friends have reported receiving at least 1 vaccination. This is great news. If you have been vaccinated, please contact Maxine Gutler. Further information, including Jim Chrisman's thought-provoking poem from last week's service, and more can be found in our weekly Candle Flame newsletter or on our Facebook Friends group.
Oh, hi. I was just obsessively checking my bids for our online auction already underway on the Bidding Owl site, which was posted in the Candle Flame and on our webpage. But I'm sure I can make it until after the service to see if I've been outbid on the Woods Poppy. I'm also getting pretty excited for our live Night at the Museum Serendipity auction next Saturday, May 15th at 6 p.m. You may have noticed me and other auction team members turning on our virtual Zoom backgrounds into various paintings over the last few weeks. I'm practicing to become part of our museum gallery on auction night. The auction team put together some instructions to help you do this too. A link to them is in the Candle Flame and will be posted in the chat as well. And if all these links are making your head spin, They are all now posted in the Serendipity Auction section of our new UUFOM website under the Learn More button. Oh, and one more exciting thing. You'll be able to contribute to the auction charity, Home to Stay Housing Assistance Center, during both our silent auction and live auction. Here to tell us a little bit about Home to Stay is their executive director, Donna St. John.
Good morning. I'm Donna St. John, the Executive Director of Home to Stay, formerly Midland Area Homes, and thank you for having me this morning. We've been serving the community for over 50 years. We were founded by a group of local churches who continued to be involved in our organization still today. We have two main programs, our homeless prevention services and our home repair services. Our homeless prevention assists households who are actually homeless or facing an eviction, so they're at high risk of becoming homeless. We are the central intake for these households to receive assistance through our case management services, to receive rental assistance, housing resource information, and advocacy. We receive some grants through the state to help support these programs. However, the grants do not cover all of our expenses. So we rely on fundraising and private donations, as well as local grants and funding through the United Way to continue our work and cover all of our expenses. We also provide a furniture service to those we are trying to help rehouse. We take in donated furniture items from community members, and we redistribute those items to people in need at no cost. And we rely on volunteers to help with our furniture redistribution program. And we also help clients who are working with our partner agencies, including Shelter House, Midlands Open Door, McFor, Senior Services, and others. Our home repair program assists owners who are in critical home repairs, but they cannot afford the cost of those repairs. So we help them by replacing furnaces, hot water heaters, repairing leaking roofs, replacing doors and windows, installing ramps, and making other accessibility modifications. We receive some small grants to help with these repairs, but those grants are focused on helping older adults age 60 and over, as well as residents who live within Midland County. So we're always exploring ways to be able to help all of Midland County by trying to get other funding and volunteer groups to help us reach out further in our community. We are a resource in this community for anyone experiencing housing instability. And we really appreciate your support, as well as many other congregations in the community. And thank you so much for having me and for considering Home to Stay.
Thank you for joining us today, Donna. After today's service, we invite everyone to go to uufom.org/Sunday feedback and let us know what you thought of today's service. Submit an article for the weekly Candleflame newsletter by Wednesday at 5 p.m. During the spring and summer months, the newsletter will be circulated on Fridays. If you need a paper copy of any form or wish to be added to our newsletter or have any other questions about any of these announcements, please email Wendy at office@uufom.org. If you have a candle or chalice at home and would like to light it now, please do so. Please join in reading our chalice lighting words today, titled A New Story into Being by Reverend Dr. David Breeden. We tender this flame, opening the book, turning to a page yet to be written, opening a story yet to be told. May we fill this fresh page wisely. May we write a new story into being. May we together inscribe the page with hope. Now Reverend Eric will share our opening words.
Thank you, Susan. Our opening words today are titled, "Let Us Drink from the Stories That Sustain Us All," by the Reverend Scott Taylor. We gather as a house of stories. As we learn of those who've gone before us, the way in front of us becomes more clear. As we weave together the tales of who we are, our loneliness lessens and the web of our oneness is revealed. As we listen deeply in those times of tender trust, we descend into the longings and learnings, hopes and fears of the humanity we share. Beneath the wells from which we drink, there is a deeper well that feeds them all. Come, let us tell each other tales of our thirst. Let us drink from the stories that sustain us all.
Thank you, Reverend Eric. With your mics muted, please join in singing our opening hymn, number 108, My Life Flows in Endless Song, an early Quaker song and American gospel tune, with musicians Sarah Nusswarren, Sandy Hay, and Reverend Eric Severson.
My life flows on in endless song, above us lamentation. I hear the real, the far-off hymn that hails a new creation. Through all the tumult and the strife, I hear the music ringing. It sounds an echo in my soul. How can I keep from singing? What though the tempest round me roars? I know the truth it liveth. What though the darkness round me close? Songs in the night it giveth. No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging. Since lo prevails in heaven and earth, how can I keep from singing? When tyrants tremble as they hear the bells of freedom ringing, when friends rejoice both far and near, how can I keep from singing? To prisons hell and dungeon vile, our thoughts to them are winging. When friends for shame are undefiled, how can I keep from singing?
Thank you all. Now Reverend Eric will share a time for all ages.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Sandy and Sarah. Our story today is a short story about a story, and it's called The Story Was Sufficient. It was written by Holocaust survivor, Nobel Peace Prize winner, and lifelong peace activist Elie Wiesel. When the great Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov saw misfortune threatening the Jews, it was his custom to go to a certain part of the forest to meditate. There he would light a fire, say a special prayer, and the miracle would be accomplished and the misfortune averted. Years later, when a disciple of Baal Shem Tov, the celebrated Maggid of Mezrich, had occasion for the same reason to intercede with heaven, he would go to the same place in the forest and say, "Master of the universe, listen. I do not know how to light the fire, but I am still able to say the prayer." And again, the miracle was accomplished. Still later, another rabbi, Rabbi Moshe Leib of Zazov, in order to save his people once more, would go into the forest and say, "I do not know how to make the fire. I do not know the prayer, but I know the place, and this must suffice." It was sufficient, and the miracle was accomplished. The years passed, and it fell to Rabbi Israel Ruzin to overcome misfortune. Sitting in his armchair, his head in his hands, he spoke to God. "I am unable to light the fire. I do not know the prayer. And I cannot even find the place in the forest. All I can do is tell the story, and this must be sufficient." And it was sufficient. And I invite you now to center yourselves and enter into a time of reflection, meditation, or prayer. Today's prayer of storytelling is by the Reverend Mandy McGlynn. Spirit of life and love, Holy One of our being and our becoming, that which is sacred within, among, and beyond us, we know so many stories about you. God, Lord, King, Father, Earth Mother, Great Spirit, Universe, Holy Parent, Divine Love, Deepest Longings, Covenanted Partner. We know stories about our country and its founding, too, of the values we claim as a people. We have stories about those narratives, about how our values have and have not manifested in our reality. Blessed One, we also know so many stories about ourselves. Some of them the same stories we tell about others. Beautiful, ugly, simple, difficult, joyous, useful, worthless. Stories about who we are, what we know, and the potentials and impossibilities of our future. Stories about our purpose and the meaning of our lives. We have countless stories buried too deep in our souls for us to even recognize them. God of discovery, help us to find the strength to excavate those buried stories. Let us lean on one another as we brush them off, hold them up to the light, and find their meaning and use. May our roots nourish us so that we might grow abundantly and flower into blessings for one another and the world. Above all, Holy Parent, sing us a gentle lullaby. In the trees and the wind, in the kind words of our neighbors, in the warmth of the sun and the sparkle of the snow, whisper to us the truest story you know, and sing it to us in notes we can never unhear. Remind us every day, every moment, that we are beloved, beloved, beloved. Amen. Let's enjoy now a choral anthem by our virtual choir. The title is Justice Choir, with music and lyrics by Peter Mayer, arranged by Cassandra Voss Deman, percussion by Kevin King, organized by Sandy Hay, and audio visuals by Sarah Nusswar.
If you want to shout, want to right some wrong, you can sing about it in a righteous song. And if you want to raise your voice up high, you can be a singer in the justice choir. If you are a citizen heavy of heart, you can take a tenor or an alto part. You can be a flame in a great big fire. You can be a singer in the justice choir. Sing out, make a better world, make a sound wave like a flag unfurled. Sing out like a liberty bell, ring out the truth you tell. Sing out, make it be known, sing like the trumpets of Jericho. Sing out at the tyrant's wall, sing until the last brick falls. Sing about courage in the face of fear, sing about light when the darkness nears. Sing about truth to the shameless lie, sing about freedom in the justice choir. Sing about the weak in the halls of power, sing about the earth in a desperate hour. Sing about the poor when the rich conspire, sing about love in the justice choir. Sing out, make a better world, make a sound wave like a flag unfurled. Sing out like a liberty bell, ring out the truth you tell. Sing out, make it be known, sing like the trumpets of Jericho. Sing out at the tyrant's wall, sing until the last brick falls. If you want to shout, want to right some wrong, you can sing about it in a righteous song. And if you want to raise your voice up high, you can be a singer in the justice choir.
Thank you to our choir. I am sure that will be stuck in my head later today. Susan will share our readings for today.
Thank you, Reverend Eric. Our first reading today is a quote on storytelling by author Ursula K. Le Guin. Storytelling is dangerous to those who profit from the way things are because it has the power to show that the way things are is not permanent, not universal, not necessary. Having that real, though limited power to put established institutions into question, imaginative literature has also the responsibility of power. The storyteller is the truth teller. We will not know our own injustice if we cannot imagine justice. We will not be free if we do not imagine freedom. We cannot demand that anyone try to attain justice and freedom who has not had the chance to imagine them as attainable. Our second reading today is an excerpt from an article titled How Powerful Stories Can Change the World for the Better by Atlantic magazine writer Derek Thompson. We have come a long way since vampires, or have we? Even today, society is bound by stories that we tell each other. In an office, loud women are bossy, loud men are assertive. An outspoken white person is authoritative, an outspoken Black person is threatening. Are men smarter than women, or whites smarter than other races? There is no scientific basis for these ideas. They are stories that have been invented, constructed, told, and believed. From the time we are children, we hear stories about the way the world ought to work. Who should we trust? Who should we fear? These social narratives passed down, like bedtime stories, across generations, tell us how to live and what to expect. Science has finally killed the folk belief in vampires, but how do we drive a stake through misogyny or prejudice? History is full of men and women who successfully championed justice and equal rights. Empathy and equality are powerful stories. They need equally powerful storytellers. Now let's share in an interlude a little story by Theodore Austin, played for us today by Sarah Nussworn.
Thank you so much, Sarah. When my child Joe was about 6 years old, that high or so, one of our favorite TV shows was the Emmy Award-winning Wishbone on public television. What's the story, Wishbone? It featured a talking dog, a Jack Russell Terrier named Wishbone, who along with his teenage owner Joe and his family engaged in everyday life and occasional misadventures. These experiences would remind Wishbone of stories and characters from classic literature, such as Don Quixote, Joan of Arc, and Robin Hood. Wishbone would act out scenes from each story in period costume, as parallel scenes played out in his family's real life, such as planting a tree on Arbor Day, or Joe catching a school cafeteria worker trying to donate food to a homeless shelter. I'm not sure whether Joe remembers these episodes or the classics on which they were based, but it was a great way to make literature accessible to children by linking them to more contemporary stories. And of course, it had a cute dog that would do tricks. I'd be surprised if Joe didn't remember the dog. Sadly, the show ended after 2 seasons because it lacked merchandising potential. The stories of classic literature have endured because of the questions they raise or the truths they reveal about human existence. The Odyssey by Homer, for example, asks us what it means to be a hero. Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin was the first political novel in the US to openly address the cruelty of slavery and helped accelerate its abolition. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein makes us question our understanding of life and death. And similar truths may be found in stories from cultures with strong oral traditions, like those of many indigenous nations on several continents. Some of the problems we face today are information overload and alternative truths. There are so many stories of all kinds from so many perspectives, news stories, fictional stories, metaphorical stories. We have to consider the source. Some stories are more truthful and some are obviously untrue. They vary in truthiness. Even as stories are informing, enlightening, or helping us to find meaning, they also can perpetuate stereotypes, systems of oppression, and even violence. One such story, The Big Lie About the 2020 Elections, is a whopping case of gaslighting. The story is that the presidential election was illegitimate, riddled with fraud, and that one party couldn't possibly lose unless it was rigged. Well, they lost. Therefore, it must have been rigged. This big lie has been embraced as truth and repeated by the majority of political conservatives in this country and one party's leaders. This has led to our current political crisis. This untrue story was used to justify a pointless, bogus audit of ballots in Arizona. Politicians desperate to hold on to power have used it to justify more than 360 voter suppression bills in 47 of our 50 states. The story is far from over. Another big lie was told in Germany in the 1930s and 40s. The story was that Jews were the cause of Germany's economic and social problems. That story was accepted as true by German social elites, members of the working class, military leaders, and the politically powerful. The potency of that lie, in part, launched World War II and resulted in the Jewish Holocaust. This horrific chapter in human history is another fact denied by many on the right in the US and worldwide. What other stories have changed the world? What stories have altered the path of civilizations and the lives of millions? Well, to whatever degree it may or may not be true, the story of the birth, death, and resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth has shaped Western civilization for millennia. That story led to the formation of new religious institutions. It inspired the creation of beautiful music and pieces of artwork. And at the same time, humans' interpretations of that story led to religious crusades around the world that destroyed cultures and caused genocide. Even 19th and 20th century Unitarianism and some of its ministers contributed to what some have called the American Indian Holocaust. Some stories are painful and still need to be told. Atlantic magazine writer Derek Thompson, in our second reading, pointed out how our society is bound by the stories that we tell each other, even if they're nonsense. That loud women are bossy, but loud men are assertive. That an outspoken white person is authoritative, but an outspoken black person is threatening. That men are smarter than women, or whites are smarter than any other race. These are stories, Thompson wrote, that had to be invented, constructed, told, and believed. From childhood, he wrote, we hear stories about how the world ought to work, who we should trust or fear. These social narratives are passed down like bedtime stories, he said, across generations, telling us how to live and what to expect. These kinds of stories, too, can change lives, and thereby the course of history. But most of our stories are open-ended. They are not finished and don't have to be to end badly. Author Ursula Le Guin was one of my favorite authors when I was growing up, especially her Earthsea novels and The Right Hand of Darkness. In today's first reading, she reminds us not only to pay attention to who controls the narrative, but that we have agency in the world. She wrote of how dangerous storytelling is to those who profit from the status quo, because storytelling has the power to show that the way things are is not permanent or universal or even necessary. That power can put institutions into question. The storyteller, she said, acts as truth teller. We will not know our own injustice if we cannot imagine justice, she wrote. We will not be free if we do not imagine freedom. We cannot demand that anyone try to attain justice and freedom who has not had a chance to imagine them as attainable. Stories allow us to imagine life differently. Derek Thompson posed the question, after writing about folk tales. He said, science finally killed the folk belief in vampires. But how do we drive a stake through misogyny and prejudice? Through story, by changing the narrative. History is full of people, he wrote, who successfully championed justice and equal rights by continuing to share powerful stories of empathy and equality. Such stories deserve equally powerful storytellers in our lifetimes to help bend the moral arc of the universe toward justice. Our choir invited us, every one of us today, to join the Justice Choir by speaking our stories in song. The lyrics went by pretty fast, so here are some of them. If you want to shout, want to right some wrong, if you want to raise your voice up higher, then sing out. Make a better world. Sing out like a liberty bell, ring out the truth you tell. Sing like the trumpets of Jericho at the tyrant's wall until the last brick falls. Sing about courage in the face of fear, about truth to the shameless liar. Sing about the weak in the halls of power. Sing about the earth in a desperate hour. Sing about the poor when the rich conspire. Sing about love in the Justice Choir. The late Jewish author and Nobel Peace Prize recipient Elie Wiesel survived the Jewish Holocaust and became a leading peace activist, largely through his writings. In today's story, he wrote of how year after year, decade after decade, Rabbi after rabbi saw misfortune threatening the Jews, and each in his own way asked God for a miracle. It began with the great Rabbi Israel Baal Shem Tov, whose custom was to enter the forest, light a fire, and say a special prayer. Misfortune was averted. Years later, a disciple, Magid of Mezrich, did the same. He went to the forest, did not know how to light a fire, but still said the prayer, and misfortune was averted. Still later, Rabbi Moshe Leib of Zasov could not light the fire and did not recall the prayer, but he did recall where to go in the forest, and misfortune was averted. And finally, Rabbi Israel of Roizen sat in his own armchair, head in hands, and said to God, I'm unable to light the fire. I do not know the prayer, and I cannot even find the place in the forest. All I can do is tell the story, and this must be sufficient. He did, and it was. Telling the story was enough to bring into being a miracle that saved the people from misfortune. We cannot be silent in the face of injustice. The stories must be told. Even if over generations we forget how to carry on the rituals, light the fire, say the prayer in just the right place in the forest, the stories must suffice because they can change the world. Elie Wiesel and many others told and still tell this true story about the Jewish Holocaust. And the telling of the true story with its facts and evidence and witnesses must suffice. If you're looking for some summer reading and some fantastic stories that deserve retelling, I invite you to visit the UUA bookstore online, uuabookstore.org. Or if you see a title there that interests you, check to see if your local public library has a copy on the shelf. As you may have noticed earlier in our service today, Unitarian Universalist ministers Scott Taylor and Mandy McGlynn shared bits of theology with us. Reverend Taylor wrote in our opening words that we gather as a house of stories, learning from those who've gone before, thus making the way in front of us more clear. Weaving the tales of who we are helps lessen our loneliness, and we're better able to see the web of our oneness. He invited us to tell each other tales of our thirst and to drink from the stories that sustain us all. He expressed the theological position, the conviction, that beneath the wells from which we drink, there is a deeper well that feeds them all. Reverend McGlynn expressed in today's prayer a universalist theology that we are held by a loving God. She wrote that we know stories about our country, its founding, the values we claim as a people. We have stories about how our values have and have not manifested in our reality. But we also know many stories about ourselves, who we are, what we know, our purpose and meaning of our lives. In fact, we have countless stories, she said, buried too deep in our souls for us to even recognize them. She asked that we have the strength to excavate those buried stories. Let us lean on one another, brush them off, hold them up to the light, and find their meaning and use. And she asked for us a blessing, that in the trees and the wind and the kind words of our neighbors, in the warmth of the sun and the sparkle of the snow, we might hear the truest story, sung to us in notes we can never unhear. That every day, every moment, we are beloved. Every one of us is beloved. When life is hard, as it inevitably will be, I invite you to hold on to this. We may not have the energy, memory, or imagination of a precocious Jack Russell Terrier, but I hope we too will find meaning and purpose by tying our own stories to some narrative greater than our own. As we turn to a page as yet unwritten, beginning a story yet to be told, may we fill this fresh page wisely. May we unearth the stories buried deep in our souls. May we sing about courage in the face of fear and about truth to the shameless liar. May we continue to share powerful stories of empathy and equality and write together a new story into being. May we know that we are beloved. And may we together inscribe the page with hope. Blessed be and amen.
Thank you, Reverend Eric. We affirm the work of this fellowship and its mission with our time, talent, and treasure. We continue to rely on you paying your pledges and providing what you would otherwise drop in the collection plate. Please give as generously as you can, and may what you give bring you joy. Thank you for your generosity. Let's share now in an offertory, a fairy story by Reinhold, played for us today by Sarah Nussworn. Thank you, Sarah. Now with your mics muted, please join Sarah, Sandy, and Reverend Eric in singing our closing hymn, number 146, Soon the Day Will Arrive. Words by Ehud Manor and music by Norit Hirsch. Played for us by Sarah Nussworn, joined by Sandy Hay and Reverend Eric.
Soon the day will arrive when we will be together, and no longer will we live in fear. And the children will smile without wondering whether on that day thunder clouds will appear. Wait and see what a world there can be if we share, if we care, you and me. Wait and see what a world there can be if we share, if we care, you and me. Some have dreamed, some have died to make a bright tomorrow, and our vision remains in our hearts. Now the torch must be passed with new hope, not in sorrow, and a promise to make a new start. Wait and see what a world there can be if we share, if we care, you and me. Wait and see what a world there can be if we share, if we care, you and me.
Thank you, Sarah and Sandy. Our closing words today are by Ian Huntington Bear, not to be confused with Paddington Bear. You are in the story of the world. You are the world coming to know itself. May you trust that all you will ever say or do belongs in the story of the world. Thank you to everyone who helped make the service possible today. Thank you to all you who joined us today. Following the postlude, we'll have our virtual coffee hour. We invite you to stay to chat if you can. You may choose to stay in the main room and speak with me, or join one of the breakout rooms for conversation and fellowship. Our musician today, Sarah Nuss Warren, will now play a postlude titled Air from Orfeo Eurydice by Gluck. Please take this time of transition to continue to contemplate the spiritual experience we shared this morning, or if you need to, take a break before returning for conversation. Whatever you may encounter in the coming week, please know that the love of this community goes with you. Until we're together again, many blessings.